Via telephone, Financial Phil McCoy from Ameriprise Financial and the Mirius Group of Financial Advisors, Winchester Avenue, Martinsburg. Good morning, Philly.
Good morning, guys. How are you all?
Much less wealthy this morning, dude.
Waiting to hear that. Yes, sir. Bad in overnight trading. Very bad, based off of those tariffs. And I'm telling you, man, I woke up and I saw that, and I actually looked before I went to bed last night, and I didn't put a lot of stock into what I saw at Sunday at 9:00. But my first reaction was, why such the reaction? Not because it's not meaningful, because it is. It's very meaningful. But why such the reaction when everybody knew that this was coming on February 1st? I think that was campaigned on. It was announced early in January. So shouldn't that have been baked in? Apparently it was not. So there's quite the knee-jerk reaction that we've seen pre-open. Now we've been given a lesson of late, especially last week with DeepSeek. We kind of had the same momentum, the same negative numbers, albeit that it was more focused on technology heading into the week. And as it turned out, it was more surgical based off of NVIDIA because of DeepSeek, and recovered most, if not all, in a lot of sectors from what DeepSeek caused. So I would do, of course, as always, we caution against knee-jerk reaction and movement in your own portfolio based off of these tariffs and what they may mean. But it is very meaningful, and I don't want to dismiss the meaning of these tariffs and what it could do and what it means. However, it's not something that would change your personal outlook and how you would be invested. And, the other part to it is I'm kind of surprised that our markets reacted this way because we knew it was coming.
Isn't this the opportunity to buy? Isn't this the time?
Well,
don't you buy the dip?
There's a lot of ways to look at it, but at the same time, yes, if you're sitting on cash, and it's not. Hold on, we'll rephrase that. Probably not, because we're not even down for 2025. 2025, even with this overnight trading, has been pretty good. So if you're saying, hey, buy a dip, there's no dip. There's no dip to buy quite yet. If you're going to do that, maybe in December at some point. But we have to look at that on both ends. We always seem like someone says, Phil, you're always bullish. You always feel like the markets are going to go up. And I said, well, yeah, I think that's a fair. If it's meant to be a criticism, it's fair because we're looking at long term. We're so focused on the long term opposed to the short term, and the longer the term, the more confident that we feel that markets will go up. But we also, on one hand, if you say, hey, opportunity to buy, well, that has to be met with a reason to sell, and we never say, hey, there's a reason to sell. It's all based off your personal situation. So same thing with opportunity to buy, unless you're sitting on cash. If you're sitting on cash, if you wait for a dip, I can kind of see that. But what if that dip never comes and you miss out on great market performance? So there's arguments to be made either way. But from the standpoint of the Mirius Group and here in Financial Phil and in Martinsburg, we're always focused on your own personal goals, your retirement days, what you're trying to accomplish, instead of the short term. We're not short term advisors for sure.
I can assume, based on the market reaction, that the markets believe tariffs don't work. And
I think there's a few assumptions. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead and finish your thought.
In my grade school history classes, they also brought out a bunch of history books that talked about the destructive after effects of trade wars and the overuse of tariffs. When President Trump was asked about tariffs, he said that the country you put the tariff on pays the tariff. They pay the tax, not the consumer. But that's not how it works. So I don't have full confidence that he understands how tariff works, because the importer actually pays the tariff, not the country you put the tariff on. It can make it more expensive for that country to sell its products in your country, but they don't pay the tax. Their sales may be affected by it, but that's why they then counter by putting tariffs on all the stuff you bring into their place.
Yes, and at which point then they do pay it. And that's going to lead us to, and I think why the market reaction, although I think it should have been baked in, is going to lead us to why I think our markets are so negative this morning based off of the tariffs, because it's an inflationary pressure. And I'm sure there's so many out there going, oh my gosh, this guy's going to the Federal Reserve again. It's been since 2021, 2022. Yes, that's where I'm going. But because tariffs are an inflationary pressure. Now, if you agree with tariffs, great. If you disagree with tariffs, that's great. We have no opinion on whether they're right or wrong for the country or if it's going to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. But we do know that it's an inflationary pressure. And if it's an inflationary pressure, it's likely or possible that it's going to slow the Federal Reserve down, or it's going to slow that inflation down to that target that John Gilstrap and I both believe should be increased to 2.5% maybe, but that target of 2%, it makes it more difficult to get to that target. So on top of, okay, we place our own tariffs and these countries place tariffs on us, they're both inflationary pressures, both of them. And it is a tax, and it's a tax that in some way, yes, it makes its way to the cost of goods and services. Our avocados are going to cost more now. If you go to Chipotle, probably skip the guacamole because it's going to be more expensive eventually, or in the grocery store. But it's an inflationary pressure on autos. I know the autos are supposedly going to be hit pretty hard with Canada and Mexico and some of the manufacturing of the parts. Even if they're put together here in the United States, they're making those parts somewhere else and bringing them in. So therefore, autos may become much more expensive. And think back to automobiles and their role in our past, and we're still dealing with it, but the inflation when it got up to 9%, a handful of that, a majority of that, I should say, was caused by the price of autos and the insurance for automobiles. So are we going back to that time? Because that had been relieved a great deal, and now are we going back to that? But again, at the end of the day, it all funnels down to the Federal Reserve and their perception of what's going, their guesses, I guess, of how inflation is going to play out and what they'll do in reaction to it.
It seems to me I can get way out over my skis on this really quickly because a lot of this I just don't understand from the theoretical standpoint. But it just seems to me, shooting from the hip, that there's a static analysis, is what we look at now. The stock market has reacted, oh, this is bad. But there's got to be a dynamic analysis that goes into this too. The avocados are from Mexico are going to be way more expensive, which theoretically, and I don't know, do the theory, not the specifics, the California avocados will now become much more attractive. So therefore, the California avocado industry will be bolstered by the fact that Mexican avocados are more expensive. Ditto American lumber and American steel. Isn't that kind of the theory through all of this?
I think that's the goal, John, and I wouldn't disagree with it, but I think a lot of the fear is this. If you're comparing the price of avocados, and I don't even know how much avocados cost. So
I don't either. I don't like avocados.
They're very good for you.
I used to, but I don't anymore. But I don't know why. But nonetheless, so forgive my inaccuracies when using examples. But if before we were looking at a price of an avocado from California at $2 and the price of an avocado from Mexico was $1.90. So we're saying, hey, that's unfair. We should be able, we should have, our avocado should be purchased by Chipotle in the United States. So, and I wouldn't disagree with that. But when you place these tariffs on it and it makes the avocados from Mexico $3.50 and our avocados are $2, the thought is that, hey, wait a minute, we don't have to sell these for $2 anymore. We can be more profitable. So instead of selling them for $2, now we can sell them for $2.80, and we're still cheaper than the avocados from Mexico. So therefore, you're going to pay more for avocados, period. Whether they're coming, you still may buy them from the United States, but they're more expensive than what they were before because the difference in that competition is so drastic. And I think that's where a lot of this coming from is like, man, those are drastic tariffs. And that's where a lot of this is coming from. And I'm just being honest with you. If I sold avocados and my main competition was twice the price of me, I'd probably increase my prices.
Certainly.
I probably would. Why wouldn't I? And, I mean, that's just good business. So it doesn't matter whether you're the lion or gazelle, if you guys have ever heard that. If you're a Mexican avocado producer or if you're a Californian avocado producer, it doesn't matter. Your prices are going to go up.
Trump's former trade chief, Robert Lighthizer, he first got on during the Reagan administration. He was on 60 Minutes last night. He's an advisor. He's not in the He's not in the position now, but this was his theory that, look, we've tried one way of trading with companies for the last however many years, and it's got us into a trading deficit, so let's try it this way. And if 5 years from now, I'm just throwing out a number, it doesn't work, then we can try something else. He said, but the other way wasn't working, so we're going to try this way.
But isn't this also part of it could be just a negotiating tool? I mean, this is how he got Mexico and Canada on board last time in his thing, was to put these tariffs on, announce them, then bring them to the drawing board and say,
well, it is a negotiating tool. Yeah, it's a complete negotiating tool. In this particular case, he's negotiating for better border policies by Mexico and Canada, and this is one way of getting it.
And I heard on the radio during a long drive of the weekend that until 1913, this is how the federal government funded itself.
There was no income tax.
Was through tariffs.
Because there was no federal income tax.
Right.
That doesn't mean that it meant a flourishing economy, though, prior to 1913.
Well, probably not. I don't know.
None of us were around.
None of us were around.
We did have the Great Depression in between there, too, since we did have income tax after that.
There were a few of those that have popped up along the way to challenge the economy here. So, Phil, otherwise, are we still in earnings report week here, or has that died down?
There's a lot of earnings. Yes, there's a lot of earnings still to come about. Those have been pretty good, and I think given us a boost through even the deep seek, and now today we've still had a pretty good 2025 or a decent 2025 to this point, and a lot of that can be credited toward earnings. And one last thought, because there's something else I'd like to jump over to as well before we go. But one last thought on tariffs. Again, this isn't whether good or bad or the end outcome is going to be positive or negative. And like Mike had brought up, and I wish I would have said, it is a negotiating ploy. So all that has lost over Sunday night, and this is why we try not to knee-jerk reaction, and we especially want our clients to behave the same way, is if Mexico and Canada come to the table with whatever it is they're looking for, and those are removed drastically, what do you think is going to happen to our markets? It's going to recover all, if not even more, than what was lost. So there could be a bright side of this in the very near future, and it worked before. So in defense of tariffs, again, I have zero opinion on good or bad. I just have an acknowledgement of what it's meaning right now in markets. But as one of my professors, if you will, for my CFP training, used to always mention that it doesn't have to be the right market move for it to be the right move. So maybe this is the right move. I have no idea from sitting in my seat here in Martinsburg. I know what it's done to overnight trading, still surprising, and I know what it means for inflation, at least in the short term, or the perception of what it's going to mean for inflation in the short term. But at the end of the day, it is a tax, and it makes things more expensive. Could that be met with tax decreases in the near future on personal income tax, which they've talked about, and it offsets some of that? Maybe. That's a thought, too. Maybe it sets up the mood for that. I'm not quite sure, but in the interim, it does boil down to, at the end of the day, what's the Federal Reserve going to do with interest rates? And that's something I really wish we could stop talking about, but that is the emphasis on what tariffs are going to do and why it's meant so much for our markets.
On CNBC, there's a little note that says Trump warns the EU and the UK they are in line for tariffs, but a U.S. deal with Britain might be in the cards here. So there could be more tariffs, more trade wars. I know, going back, like I say, to my younger days in economic classes and such, typically trade wars were not productive for anybody, and they don't end particularly well. But they can end suddenly after there's been enough pain and suffering along the way here. They're speculating gasoline prices could go up 75 cents a gallon because, interestingly enough, even though the United States produces so much more fuel than we used to, we can't use most of it because we don't have the refineries for it. The type of fuel that we're producing, we don't actually have the refineries in place, enough of them to take advantage of that, so we have to export it, and we import fuel from Canada, obviously, and that's got, I think, a 10% tariff. That was a directed one, not 25%.
And the funny thing is, Canadian fuel in Canada is 3 times the price of American fuel.
Because they have socialized medicine, and that's applied to gasoline taxes. That's how they pay for the socialized medicine. So everybody's got something, right?
Yep.
All right. Bill, in regards to, I know you had been asked to bring this up here too, so we'll talk about the fork in the road letter to federal employees, because this deals with buyouts. That might not be the applicable word in this case. It's not an actual real buyout, but that's kind of the term people are using. And I know that John Everson asked you to talk about this because you're getting a lot of calls about this from federal employees.
We are, and rightfully so. So it allows us to, and especially on air, for us to put our financial planning hat on instead of the investment hat, because we really do here in our office, we focus on the financial planning aspect. This is a lot of the things that we can control. We accept that we can't control what happens in the markets, and we can't predict it, but we can, in some cases, predict the financial outcome, or we can plan for a financial outcome. And this fork in the road decision is just that. It's a fork in the road, and it's brought about, rightfully so, a lot of anxiety for federal employees. And I don't know the exact number. I want to say it was 2.3 million emails went out with this fork in the road. And it basically says, hey, if you decide that you would like to retire, you can get paid. Now, the guidance on that is differing from office to office, of course. But the email was the same. If you choose to retire, you can, or leave or resign, you can do so and still get paid until September 30th. That gives you time to find other employment, blah, blah, blah. If you do stay, we're going to restructure. We're making these changes, and we can't guarantee you a job. And I think that one line, I didn't say it exact, but that one line in the email is what has caused anxiety. I'm sure no one, there's not many anyway. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm going to resign anyway, so let's have at it. Those are easy. If you were getting ready to retire anyway, then why wouldn't you, right? So that's an easy decision. But if you're the 45-year-old that's got 2 children and you're getting ready to put people through school and this is your source of income, yes, it's going to bring back a great deal of anxiety. So we are getting a lot of questions and phone calls from our clients, and even some that aren't our clients, that are saying, hey, what do I do? Do I accept this offer or can't I? And that's where we can't help. We can't say, yes, you should accept this offer, or no, you shouldn't accept this offer. The only time we can say that is with an in-depth financial plan, and of course we don't have time to do that by the time February the 6th comes along unless you're already a client. So what we have said to people and everyone, and this is, I guess, a blanket statement, look at your personal goals and values. What are you trying to get accomplished? What are the risks and rewards of the decision that you make? If I say, hey, I'm going to resign, what's the reward for that? What's the risk? Is there a risk that I won't get paid? Is there a risk that they said, hey, I don't have to go to work, but then I resign and they come back around and it's like, no, your department's a little bit different. Things the IRS, if you will, it's tax season. So what if 50% or 60% of the IRS accepted it? I'm sure it's not going to be that high, but if they did, was like, now you got a problem. So will some of those people still have to work? The impact on your family, the impact on your current life with whether or not you're, funding college or saving for college, or have you got a mortgage to pay? You've got all these decisions to come into. And if I accept this offer, this resignation offer, and I don't know what to call it other than an offer, because some view it as a buyout and some don't. There's been a handful that told me that they were told that if you resign, you do still have to work in order to get paid. That they were directly told that, not by the union, but by someone up above them. And I don't have names, and I don't want to give specifics, but there were a handful that said, no, you do have to work. Just so you're clear, because of this department, it's too important, the job that you're taking. But on the flip side of that, because of this job and the importance of you, we would prefer that you not resign. Your job is safe. So they feel a little bit more comfortable with their situation. But all the information that you're going to need, you're going to have to look at your budget. You have to look at what are my expenses from now until September 30th, and what are my prospects. If I leave and I'm earning $100,000, whatever that number is, what are my prospects? What is the potential for me to obtain a job and make that same type of money? And if you can't, and if you can make $50,000, or what's my skill set bring me $40,000, whatever it may be. Can I live off of that? And if not, then, well, you probably shouldn't accept it and take the risk, because of the fear, everybody's fear is, if I don't accept the resignation offer, if I say, no, I'm going to stay, their fear is that they're going to get relocated to somewhere that's not feasible and they have to move. Or their fear is that they're going to get fired anyway and they're not going to have that income until September 30th because they didn't accept the offer. I'm hopeful, and I think everyone is hopeful, that maybe that deadline gets extended to give people more time to kind of gather information, gather personal information. But one thing that your financial planner should not be telling you, whether it's us or somewhere else, is whether or not to accept the offer. We should be telling you what are the repercussions if you accept the offer, the financial repercussions if you accept the offer, and what you need to do moving forward, whether you do or whether you don't accept the offer. But this is a big deal, especially in this area with the amount of federal workers that we have. So, and there's a lot of questions to be asked internally from your own office and for those financial professionals, whether it's your financial planner, your CPA, looking at your children's situation, your spouse's income situation. What did I have a raise on the horizon? Does that mean anything for me whether I accept this? There's a lot of variables to go into that, and a lot to consume before you get to February the 6th.
So, Phil, I need some personal financial advice. Raising a teenage daughter who has now just got into Amazon, I think. How did you manage to do 3? And what do I have to look forward to since she just turned 14 and I'm spending an exorbitant amount of money on makeup?
You had 2 daughters, Phil, not 3, right?
I've got 2. Yes,
2,
I've got 2, and one thing we've done up until late with Amazon is we don't give them access to that, Mike.
All right.
Because that thing
first mistake has already been made.
Yes. Now they did get one is 21 and she's a full blown adult now, I guess, in most aspects. So she has access, but she also has her own means to pay for it. And Ada, the baby she's 17, will be 18 here in a few weeks, but she's got a little bit of money, so she's got limited access to Amazon with mommy and daddy's financial means anyway. So that there's a lot to take into consideration with daughter sports. I know your daughter's getting into volleyball.
Yes,
and all those things. And it sounds lighthearted, but if you're a parent of a teenage son or daughter, what does this mean? If I don't accept this and I lose, or I do accept it and I have to take a lower paying job, there's a lot of, and that's where the anxiety comes from. Can we still afford to pay for the travel volleyball or the travel softball or the band or all these activities that cost so much money with your children? And is that worth giving up, or do I fight through it? And that's all those things that come into place. Your current situation, your current lifestyle, how will my decision impact that? And, so that's what you need to find out. You shouldn't be reaching out to someone outside of your internal leadership on reflections on whether or not to accept the resignation. You should be reaching out to find out what's it do to me financially, and what do I need to do to continue my current lifestyle, and talk internally with your family on what you're willing to give up.
I need a Super Bowl pick from you, quick.
I'm going to give it, man. And I'm going with my heart yet again. I'm going to go the Philadelphia Eagles win 31-26. And I'm going to say A.J. Brown is the biggest difference maker. The focus is going to be on Saquon, and A.J. Brown's going to go off. Go Eagles. Fly, Eagles, fly.
How do people reach you today, Phil, for more information?
You can reach us at 304-263-4343 or stop by and see us with an appointment at 1270 Winchester Avenue right here in Martinsburg.
Thank you, Phil. Have a great day.
Thank you, guys. Have a great one.